The Crowded Room is an Apple TV original show. It stars Tom Holland and he plays this character called Danny Sullivan. Now, Danny Sullivan has ended up in prison and we are trying to figure out how he ended up there, what's gone on in his life to get him there. And we're learning that through a psychiatrist who is played by Amanda Seyfried. This is a show that has a structure where it jumps around a lot. You know, it's not linear, it's cutting back, it's cutting forth, it's revisiting scenes again that you've already seen from a different perspective. And it's one of those that once you get further through the show, you start to understand it all and it all sort of, gets revealed to you. This show is loosely based on a book called The Minds of Billy Milligan. Billy Milligan was a man diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder, essentially meaning he has multiple personalities that he switches between. You think of it like the guy from Split, where each personality is a different person and the other person is unaware of almost what the other person's been doing. This guy, Billy Milligan, raped 3 people in the 70s, but he did not end up going to prison for it, as they put it down to the fact that his other personalities had committed the crime and he was unaware of it. And this was the first time ever that this had been used as a defense in court. He was the first guy to get cleared from a charge because an alternative personality did it. And this show is, as I said, loosely based on that because it changes the location that things take place, it changes the name of the character, and it actually changes the crime itself because it obviously wants our main character, Danny, to be someone that we sympathise with. So therefore they lessen sort of the blow of what he's done so that we can empathise not just with him, but with his illness, his disease, as they call it in this show. We can empathise with the fact that he has multiple personalities and that he's not in control in a sense of what the other ones do. The synopsis for this show labels what Danny does as a shocking crime. It really isn't that shocking, so the severity of what he's done never feels as bad as they paint it to be in this show. I think they could have upped the crime and still had him be someone that we sympathise with. I'm not saying have Danny Sullivan start raping people in this show, but I just think the crime itself is just not that bad in this show, and everyone's always going like, he's done this really shocking thing, and obviously it's all this childhood trauma and it's built up to this thing that he did, and I just think what he did wasn't like that terrible, and I think they could have upped the stakes a bit there. Either way, that's your premise, and as I said, we jump around quite a lot, revisiting, different times of Danny's life, and this is how we eventually learn about the fact that he has this multiple personality disorder, that he has, these alters that they call them in this show, these, personalities that he switches between that help him through certain situations. It's kind of a dealing with trauma thing. He has specific personalities for specific scenarios in his life that Danny himself would not be able to handle. I think this is a good show with a good concept, and I understand why they didn't make the show entirely based on the true story, as it would be pretty dark and harder to support the lead character. So I don't really have many issues here with the show and the story that was told, apart from the fact that I think they could have made the crime like a little bit more heavy than it was. But my main gripe with this show really is the structure. I think it's pretty messy, not all the time, but quite a lot of the time. The first few episodes feel like they have this structure. You kind of got Danny in the prison, and then you're cutting back to the, events that led him to commit this crime, and then that shows how he got into the prison. But it's pretty simple. It's Danny in prison, Danny not in prison, just cutting back, still like a similar age, but just showing the events that led up to it. But then it gets a little messy as that continues, because we jump to an even earlier point in his life, and then we spend some episodes where Danny is more of a secondary character, and then we're with him when he's a young child, and then we jump around some more, and then we just get to our conclusion, which then starts to run sort of pretty linear, and then we also view stuff from a different perspective through all of this. So it's quite a lot. You never really know where you're going to go in an episode, and it just kind of throws you around to all these different points. It's a tricky show to structure, I think. They kind of want to tease you with where you're going to end up, and they kind of maybe have little breadcrumbs thrown in there to sort of tease what's really going on. But the thing is, you've got to throw in the fact that a lot of the characters you see in this show actually turn out to be figments of his imagination. They're actually his, alternative personalities. So as you're watching along, you kind of view the show one way, and then later on you realise that everything you viewed, you've kind of been viewing wrong, because that's the whole point. I do think this is just a really difficult show to structure. If you tell this story in a linear fashion, and then throw at the audience that in fact everyone you've been seeing is, just an alter version of him, you'd be like, well, that's just a cheap cop-out. So I understand why they structured it in a way where they kind of tell you the story one way and then reveal to you that actually that's not quite true. And then they tell you that, all this other stuff's been going on, that he has this disorder and that a lot of the people you've been seeing are the same person. It's a tricky one. Whilst I can sit here and say I think the structure was a bit messy, I can't really think of how you would structure this, because it's just seems like a really difficult thing to structure, because you don't want to just throw the big reveal at someone right at the end, because then it just feels kind of cheap. But then you also need to, kind of weave it in a delicate fashion. So it's tough. It's one of those, it just kind of felt a bit all over the place at times, but maybe that's the point because of what's going on in this guy's head. Maybe it's meant to feel kind of messy and scattered, but I don't think it's like messy to a point where you're just completely lost with what's going on. I think it just kind of maybe needed to have that messy structure, but in a way it's not the best viewing, but I'm not exactly criticizing it either. I know I'm not really explaining this very well, maybe I am, I don't know, but structure is just a bit crazy here. The performances are pretty solid here. Nothing stood out to me as like outstanding, but Tom Holland is very good. He was able to display a wide range of his abilities here outside of web swinging. Supporting cast were also good here, if not a bit cliche with some of their actions and dialogue, but their interactions with Danny were always interesting. I think those were the highlights of the show, really, was just Danny interacting with people and just seeing what he's going to say next, because he was a very fascinating character. I found that all elements of the show were just good and solid, not amazing, not poor, just good. Costume and soundtrack and performances and all that sort of stuff, nothing blew me out of the water, but I just thought, yeah, decent. I think this is the type of show that on a rewatch it could possibly be better, because you're going into it with a fresh set of eyes. You know stuff, you have this knowledge now about his disorder, and that a lot of the characters you see in those early episodes are in fact not real. So maybe at that point you're going to be looking at it and analysing it a different way and spotting, and looking out for more signs. But I almost think that possibly with this show they could have left like a few more hints and some breadcrumbs for us to sort of pick up on and be like, something doesn't seem quite right. Because I don't know if I'm just oblivious or whatever, but like those first kind of 3 episodes, I think it does not come across that the people you are looking at, around Danny are not real people and that they're just versions of him. So it kind of feels like one of them where maybe they could have left a few more clues, because it's not very obvious that that's the route you're going to be heading. I would be curious to see if this improves on a rewatch, but then I don't really have the most desire to rewatch this show, because whilst it was good, it wasn't like the most entertaining thing. So it's a tricky one. Maybe possibly rewatch it one day just to see if it does improve. This is a good show. I think Tom Holland does well here. He's very committed, and his interactions with supporting characters were always interesting, but the chaotic structure and toned down premise make this a bit of a messy show that felt like it could have been executed better. I would give The Crowded Room a 7.5 out of 10, and on the rewatchability rating, I would give it a 5. I don't necessarily want to rewatch this show, but I think there could potentially be some value in it. If you've seen The Crowded Room, let me know what you think about it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.